All right, now that you have played around with watercolors a little bit, you're feeling a little bit more comfortable, now we can start doing your final. One of the things you need to think about is that atmospheric perspective that we talked about with those artists. So the images that are in your foreground should be brighter or more contrasty, and the images that are in your background should be lighter and less contrasted and maybe even a little bit more blue. When we're working with watercolors, I'm going to say for me, what I'm going to do is, because I'm working with kind of watercolor alternatives, I am going to make my nice contrasted color the darkest colors that I can in my foreground, which means my foreground is the first thing I'm going to paint. So I'm going to paint things in my foreground first because I want them to be contrasty, and in order to do that, I'm going to have to do layers. So I'm going to take, for example, this is the pond, so I am going to take it, and you kind of hold your watercolor brush and pay attention to your strokes and pay attention to your edges. Now, one thing watercolor will do is it will bleed. So I can't paint this hill right now. If I go to paint this hill, this blue is going to bleed right into the hill. So you can kind of see, and I'll do it kind of over here. So if I put something here and I put right next to it, it's going to bleed right into it. You can use that to your advantage a little bit. So like I'm going to take some of this kind of greenish color that I've made, and I can add it to my blue and see how it kind of mixes together and gives you kind of an ombre. So since I don't want this blue to be like sky blue, I can mix in a secondary color to make it look a little different. Because I'm just starting, the paint is staying where I'm putting it because everything else is dry. If I go to paint a second thing right next to my first thing, it's going to bleed into it. So what I'm going to want to do, now that I'm done here, I can kind of add some more. So I'm adding that green on top. I'm kind of adding a little bit more pigment on top until I kind of get it to the darkness that I want. Or as much as I can, because eventually the paper is just going to stop accepting the water until it dries. So I kind of have that in here, and I have to pause because I cannot do anything else in my foreground until that water dries and I see how dark it ends up being. Watercolor will, even if using regular watercolors, it will dry lighter than what you've got. So you're going to want to see it dried. The nice thing though is you see I just dripped there and I can wipe it right up. So if you make a mistake, you can always wipe it up and try again. Once you let it dry, you can see it's pooling a little bit there. You can let it dry and then move on. Now, one thing that you can do if you want to get some stuff done a little quicker, if you're running behind. Now, I can't paint anything that's up here because it's gonna bleed into here. But I can take that same blue and I can paint my sky. Now, for my sky, so that it doesn't blend in with this, I'm making my sky lighter. Now, I might find after my first layer has dried that I'm going to want to put a second layer on there because I don't like how light it is. But right now, because that's in my background and that's in my foreground, I want this to be brighter. So I'm definitely putting a second layer on here. And I'm trying to keep this as light as possible. Okay? So the other thing that you can...